Hey, Brent, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for giving us a little bit of time.
Are you kidding, Mark? For you, anything. I am super excited to be here.
Well, listen, as you know, we had your partner in crime, Matt Dixon, on the show maybe 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago. And by the way, we were geeking out a ton about the Challenger sale and Teach, Tailor, Take Control, how it's still relevant today, all the stuff you guys went through when you originally wrote that.
Yeah.
Actually, people don't remember, there was a lot of pushback to the Challenger sale when it originally came out.
Yep.
And 10 years later, like everything else, now it appears as genius, and I'm sure it did back then. So our listeners really got a good insight into a lot of that detail. But Brent, what they're always interested in somebody's kind of short journey. How did you get to this point in your career in professional sales? Not a natural path into becoming kind of a sales expert in research based on what you did in your journey. So tell us a little bit about that journey.
So I'll do it briefly, Mark, because it's a long, sordid tale that is pretty boring to most people, I think. But it raises a really interesting question. So my background is a 30-year career as a professional researcher, teacher, writer, presenter. I research things and I present things. As I like to say, I like to create knowledge and I like to share knowledge, and that gets me excited, gets me kind of geeked out. It started early in my career in, of all things, German and applied linguistics, which is what my PhD is in.
Wow.
Because that makes sense, right?
You're perfect for the show.
Well,
we just had her.
I don't even know what that means. Who listens to the show? The applied linguistics of German?
Simon. We just had the founder of Simon Kucher and Partners coming to us from Germany. That's the episode before this one. So this is perfect.
Sehr gut. Okay, wunderbar. So but I'll tell you, so, and then again, the short version is, went to business school, got an MBA, left academics, and joined, at the time, Corporate Executive Board, which became CEB, which became Gartner.
Right.
The job they had open at the time when I moved into that research job just happened to be in the sales practice. So that set in motion a 19-year career of studying the heck out of B2B sales and marketing. Mark, actually, it'd be interesting to get your thoughts on this, because you and I are very similar, but very different in this respect. And this is some of the pushback we got on Challenger, which is, who is this schmo to be telling me how to sell? I've been selling for 20 years. This guy's never carried a bag. He's just a researcher. Why would we ever want to listen to researchers? And I always kind of took that to heart, which is, one, I wanted to make sure that we did the world's best research we possibly could, so the quality was high. Two, I've been on more sales calls than I could even count. I mean, but there is a difference. I've never carried the number, which I don't often admit publicly, but I've never had the quota that you've had. I've always sat next to the person so you remember when we used to literally slide the contract across the table and hand someone a pen, right? Do you remember that? I've been there and I've watched that conversation. I can't tell you how many times, and I've always watched it as a participant, as an SME or subject matter expert, but I've always watched it as well as almost like what's called an ethnographic researcher, someone who's like in the moment doing research. This is why I think one of my favorite places to be as someone who studies sales is at the airport, which I miss dearly, because there's nothing more interesting than sitting at the gate, listening to all the sales reps calling back to their managers and explaining how the sales call went. It's so fascinating, right? And sometimes they didn't go so well. It's always a little kind of, well, I don't know what the word is, but then after they hang up with the manager, then they call their spouse, and that's an even more interesting conversation. Then I try to stop listening.
Then the truth.
Because if there's like this is so not any of my business, but oh my God, is this interesting? But
that's funny.
But all that's to say is, I think there's a place, and this goes, by the way, not just for the world of sales and marketing, but shoot, anything we do in technology, in medications, in pharmaceuticals, and in politics. I think there's a place for really world-class research. There's a place for people who've experienced it, who've done the job. Who are you to tell me how to sell when I've sold and you haven't? And I am deeply respectful of that point of view. I'd like to think that I and others like me bring something to the table as well. But that's the long answer to your short question of my background, which is I just like to create and share knowledge because I geek out on it.
So part of that, by the way, Brent, you said, hey, you want to get my opinion on that.
Yeah.
Our whole podcast exists because facts matter.
Yeah.
So, there is this world of folks out there that are, maybe unconsciously competent.
Yeah.
But there's a world of people who know how difficult this is. And by the way, as I bet your research is going to tell us, it continues to get harder and harder and harder and harder. So facts and research matter in professional sales.
Yeah.
And that there's this lifelong, you've been on it, but we've been on this lifelong mission to increase the professionalism of B2B sales. It's not a
Yeah,
trade, it's a profession. And that's why in this podcast, we've had Harvard's best guy people, Frank Cespedes, great guy, talks
Frank's
about
great.
that.
Yeah. Hmm.
We had Dan Pink, who wrote one of the books, which I think you talk about facts and research. The bibliography of To Sell is Human is like an encyclopedia or an MBA in sales, basically.
100%. Yeah, Dan
It,
does his work. He's a
Holy
brilliant guy.
smokes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's so fast. He's like you, mentally he's so fast. When I was interviewing him, I just felt like I was drowning the whole time. Listen to that podcast. And
Yeah.
IQ points matter and I don't have them.
Stop.
But
I just like to talk
stuff,
fast so people don't realize I don't know what the heck I'm talking about.
but facts and data and research matter.
Agreed.
And if nothing else, the one thing that I absolutely believe for B2B sales today is we have to be growth oriented.
Yeah.
What we did yesterday may have been great, but it won't help us always in the future. It's a foundation. But, when I was playing hockey or when I'm drumming in the band, if I'm not getting better, they'll go find somebody who gets better. They will.
That's a fair point. That's right. But the flip side too, Mark, is not to overstate it, because not that you are, but the worlds collide in interesting ways. And I think especially now in the world of B2B sales, so much of what I've been studying over the last 5 years has a very human element to it. So in other words, I wouldn't want to imply somehow that this is like a septic or an antiseptic world of research, right? It's actually messy and it's murky and it's fascinating, because at the heart of any, as you know, and it's to state the obvious maybe, at the heart of any B2B enterprise purchase or sale are human beings, right? And understanding the psychology of how those human beings are interacting across numerous boundaries between the supplier-buyer boundary, but then across the boundaries of functional silos inside the buyer group. It's just, and it gets wrought with all of those different human interactions, which arguably in many ways have nothing to do with sales per se and everything to do with things like behavior and identity and belief in super interesting ways. And to understand that is a way to understand not just like how selling is happening, but like how are these interactions happening and how can I, cynically manipulate them or take advantage of, and then maybe less cynically, how can I understand and just make the world a little bit better place by creating more productive interactions?
Well, boy, it leads to, you spoke about it way back with the Challenger sale. In my background was doing kind of mega deals back in the day, even before that. There was always this need for consensus. When you're doing $100 million deal or even more, there's 10, 12, 14 people at the table. And by the way, 2 or 3 of them, you talk about emotion, 2 or 3 of them are literally worried about a deal that size ending their career with that firm.
100%.
So if
right.
it's, and no one wants to make a mistake. So your kind of job is, how do I convince this person or give them comfort or confidence that if they move forward with us with this major decision, it's not going to end their career?
That's right. That's right. But on that point, Mark, just real quick, because I think this is a really subtle but important point, because so much of the work that I was involved with at Gartner prior to my departure, and which I just left Gartner just a couple months ago, started a new job. We can talk about it if you want. If not, otherwise,
for
it's
sure,
totally fine.
For sure, we will.
But I just want to make sure I give credit where credit is due to the team at Gartner who's still there and doing amazing work, and I've been involved deeply in it. But this idea of confidence, that's what I want to land on, is in my mind is maybe it's always been true, but especially in today's world of so many different people and potentially very large deals have their tendrils, pushing into all sorts of different parts of the customer organization, have implications, and things go wrong. They go wrong broadly across the company, right? They don't go wrong in very point. There's not point problems, but like point solutions is not a point problem. It's a broad problem.
They're not isolated.
That's exactly right. But here's the thing: is so what I see again and again in all this research is that the thing that we need to solve for, whether you're an individual sales professional, a marketing professional, or a supplier organization, or a success team, or a value team, the thing that we ultimately have to solve for today more than anything else is, in fact, customers' confidence. At Gartner, we called this decision confidence, but essentially it's customers' confidence individually and then collectively as a buying group to make a large scale decision on behalf of their company. Have we looked at the right information? Have we looked at enough information? Have we asked the right questions? Do we feel confident that we've come to the right conclusions, given that this information sometimes conflicts? But the thing I'd land on here, Mark, that I think is so interesting to me is, notice that this is a very specific flavor of confidence, and it's very different than the kind of confidence we've traditionally talked about over the last 20 years in sales and marketing. Usually, particularly with all of our good friends and colleagues over the marketing side, when we talk about customer confidence, we're really thinking about customers' confidence in us. Are they confident in our brand? Are they confident in our reputation? Are they confident in me as a professional seller? Do they believe what I'm saying? Are they confident that our solution will help them solve their problem? And all of that stuff is still true. I don't want to diminish its importance, but I kind of do actually, relative to this other flavor of confidence. I think it's actually much smaller, which is the thing that really matters isn't so much customers' confidence in you, your product, your brand. Rather, it's customers' confidence in themselves and their ability to make a large-scale decision on behalf of their company. When they ask, have we looked at enough? It's not like, they're not asking, hey, Mark, have you taught me enough? They're asking, have I understood enough? In other words, do you see the pronouns are important here? That when they measure confidence, the pronouns of the confidence questions are not you pronouns, they're I pronouns. They're first person, not second person, right? I told you I had a background in linguistics, so I talk geeky like that. But it's like, it's really interesting, because what that ultimately means is the number one thing that I think we all need to solve for in today's world as suppliers, as vendors, as partners, is customers' confidence in themselves. And I'll stop to get that. Now that has all sorts of really interesting implications off of things like Challenger and the article I put in an HBR in January called Sensemaking for Sales. We could talk about a little bit, but let me just take a breath, because I don't know, distinction without a difference. What do you think, Mark? Or do you think, are you buying what I'm putting down, man?
Let's
yeah.
The art of persuasion. You're convincing. No, absolutely, Brent. I think for me, the first one you talked about, oftentimes confidence and credibility.
Yeah.
I always think of that as credibility. The second one kind of leads, when you put the onus on I, it leads for me to the paradox of choice.
100%. Great book, by the way, Barry Schwartz. Great stuff.
Yeah, and I didn't read the book. I've seen, I guess, the paradox of choice. I guess I've seen the TED Talk. And for those viewers, basically the simplest way of putting this is, 40 years ago, you could buy 3 pairs of jeans: Levi's, Lee, and Carhartt. And you'd go in, you'd buy your jeans. They didn't fit well. They were super stiff. You weren't happy. You loved them, by the way. You left the store absolutely convinced you bought the right pair of jeans. Today, you can buy one of 300 types of jeans, and they fit better. They're stretchy. They're made to your body type. They look spectacular. But I've just done this recently. You go into a jeans store and talk to them literally about the 15 different pairs of styles of jeans they'll put in front of you. When you leave the store with a pair of jeans, all you think about is, because I had a choice of 15, I personally just made the wrong decision.
That's right.
Better
so
jeans.
The paradox is, the more choice you give someone, the less likely they are to be satisfied with whatever it is that they choose. Because it's not that they spend all the time thinking how great the thing they chose is, they start thinking about all the great things about the things they didn't choose.
Right.
And so in this world where we are now inundated with more choice than ever before, we're inundated, not just in terms of like options, like suppliers, like supplier A, supplier B, but then solution configurations, and then features and benefits. But even broader than that, Mark, is we are inundated with choices of information. Should I read this white paper or that white paper? Should I believe this perspective or that perspective? Should I listen to this podcast or that podcast? Every one of those is an opportunity, if you will, an opening for potential regret, for potential frustration. And what happens is, collectively in this world, we wind up in this cycle of, it's a cliche, I suppose, but the paralysis of analysis. You wind up in this learning loop, right? Because the psychology shows it's really interesting. The more I learn, more than likely in today's world, the more I'm likely to find that there's more yet to learn still, right? So to your point about jeans, like, wow, I think I would go buy some jeans. Oh, there's more kinds of jeans than I ever thought. I better look into this more. Oh, now and the more you look in, it's like, oh, wait, there's salvage, there's handcrafted, there's in the US, there's the Japanese seem to be really good at this whole denim thing. Who knew?
I know.
It's like, right? It's crazy, right? So it's like oh my God, I better study this even more. And all of a sudden 6 months have gone by and you still don't have a freaking pair of jeans, right? And it's and you're really, really frustrated. And in this world, it seems to me, I think I often joke, it's kind of funny, Mark, that commerce still happens at all. It's like, it's like, and it has to happen because people have to buy replenishables and things break and you got to buy stuff. But it does make me wonder, and this is where Challenger, this is not the world, this is not the context in which we wrote Challenger. This is a very different context, but it does make me wonder how much more commerce could happen and would happen if customers just felt more confident in their ability to make decisions better, more quickly on behalf of their company.
So let's lead to that if we can, Brent.
Yeah.
I think that goes down a great path. The stat always eludes me. I've heard a stat that probably originally came from Gardner.
Yeah.
And I can't remember, but you correct me with the right one, please. Literally
Okay.
correct me. But I
Yeah.
thought I heard a stat that the percentage of deals from no decision going to no decision went from about 21% kind of 10 years ago to high 30s today. What is this? Do you have that stat? Do you know how many significant deals actually just go to no decision? Did Gardner ever track that? Because I thought it was a Gardner stat.
I don't know that we ever tracked it quite that way, because actually methodologically, that's actually hard to do, because you'd have to survey people and ask them, what would you have done? You have to ask them a hypothetical. But there's no question anecdotally, qualitatively, we know that more deals either wind up in no decision or status quo or more time. It's like when your customer does the whole thing, like, why don't you call me in 6 months? And by the way, they never actually want you to call them in 6 months, right?
That's the Canadian way of saying we're done.
Exactly.
Yeah, call me.
That's right.
The Canadian way is
call me in 6 months is very.
We're done. They're too nice. Right?
It's so. I love you guys in Canada. You're the best people on the planet. Oh my God. Yeah. But that's so true, right? To call me in 6 months means go away, you bother me, kid. Right. So it's the, and so, but I think more insidious might be over the top language. But I think the equally important in this story, Mark, is not just the no decision, but how many big deals became small deals, right?
Interesting.
You see what I'm saying? So deal size is just as important as as yes, no, a binary decision. And of course, there's also cycle time. Deals that took 6 months that now take 12 months. That is something we reported on at CEB and then Gartner, was the amount of time that customers thought the purchase was going to take versus the amount of time the purchase actually took.
Right.
And on average, it took twice as long. So if I thought it was going to take me 6 months, or our company by take us 6 months to buy the solution, it took us 12. If we thought it was going to take a year to make this decision, it took 2. Think about that.
Completely logical, by the way.
Yeah.
So in our viewers listeners have heard me say this a million times. If you sell something significant, your client doesn't buy it all the time. They don't know how to buy it.
That's right.
So which will lead to you captured all of this stuff so well in the Harvard article on Sensemaking sales. But as a result of which, they have really no idea how to look at it. They don't really know how to potentially engage other people to get consensus or take it up the chain. And they have no idea of the 3 questions somebody at the most senior level is going to ask that'll kill the deal.
So there's kind of 3 dynamics going on here that all have at their heart that same sort of critical component that you just mentioned. And it's sort of at the heart of everything I've been involved in the research over the last 20 years in sales is there seems to be, or at least there was, I don't know so much anymore, but if you go back to prior to Challenger, there was, broadly speaking, somewhat unspoken, but broad and sometimes very overt, is so explicit or implicit, that's what I was looking for, but an explicit assumption that the customer knows best, or the customer is right. So, and this is where, to be fair to Neil Rackham, I don't think this is what he was intending in spin, but a lot of applications of spin and solution selling practices, which is what we were after originally, was not sort of what was written in the literature, but what was actually happening in reality. Was there was like, you just ask your customer what's keeping them up at night, or what are their top 3 priorities for the year, what do they need to get done, and we still go out and ask questions like that. Maybe not the what's keeping up at night, that one I haven't heard in a while, thank goodness, but but notice all implicit in all of those kinds of discovery questions is a belief that the customer actually has an answer, right? That they know what they want, they know their priorities, and they're probably never going to admit that they don't know, because they'd probably be fired if they did, and they're on the hook for knowing. But I think we'd all agree, again, this is that human aspect I was talking about before. Let's face it, we all have that sneaking little suspicion, or at least concern in our heart of hearts, that sometimes we don't let out. It's like, yeah, but am I right? should that be what I'm
For
worried about?
sure.
Is
For
that what's
sure.
supposed to be keeping? And if there's one thing every single company or every single executive at a company wants to know, in my experience, wow, that's a way overstatement. But let's go with it. Let's see what happens. Where does this take us?
No fact
Is what-
checking for today of this
That's right.
podcast. Don't bother, Thomas. Do not bother fact checking today.
That's exactly right. Remember, I told you I'm a researcher, but this isn't research. This is here's what we'll do. We'll call this qualitative and anecdotal.
Whiteboarding.
Right. That gets me off the hook of actually saying something that's true, maybe. But I'll joke aside, because I think this will resonate with everyone on the call or listening in, which is, this seems like the number one thing every executive wants to know is, what do other executives like me do, right? It's social norming. It's Daniel Kahneman. I want to know, I want to benchmark. And the reason why is because we're all afraid. It's like the FOMO thing that we see on the B2C side or on the social side is, what am I missing? You know, what should I know that I not know? Did I overlook something that's going to come back and bite me in the derriere down the road? And so if I ask you what's keeping you up at night, it's like, that's what's keeping me up at night. It's not what I know, it's what I don't know that's keeping me up at night.
This is the thing that is so interesting. The great point, which is the organizations we work with that have large customer bases and large sales organizations.
Yeah,
you actually know the answer to that question.
100%.
So, you know,
or at least, well, let me, if I may, just briefly, you know, a potential answer. Do you see?
Right.
I'm splitting hairs, but I think it's important, right? But notice the posture, because this is actually really important, Mark, which the posture is not like, we have the ansor. So
no, we know what the market's doing is what I would suggest, Brent.
Even better. How about this? So I've shared this phrase all over the world with sales professionals, and only because it's one I use in my own work all the time. I find it to be very powerful, which is like literally with quotes around it. In working with other customers like you, one of the things we've been surprised to learn is fill in the blank, right? Fantastic. And notice it's got all sorts of really interesting, again, I'm a linguist, right? So in working with other customers like you, this isn't my expertise. This is not my opinion. I'm not telling you to just trust me. I'm actually, notice I've just repositioned myself from the expert to Switzerland. I am neutral, although that's less true these days, but that's a different story. But so I am nothing but a conduit, right? I am the hub of a network connecting you to who you really want to talk to, which is not me, but other companies like you. So in working with other companies like you, one of the things that we were surprised to learn is, I'm not an expert. I thought this is surprising too. It's kind of weird. You might think this is weird. I'm about to lay on you something completely reframing a nutso, and I agree with you. It's reframing a nutso. I'm not saying you need to believe this because it's God's truth. You know, so there's like really subtle positioning matters here. And so in working with other companies like you, one of the things we were surprised to learn is X. And I think there's so much going on there that scratches the itch of what customers wanted. This is why, you know, Challenger, and we kind of set ourselves up for this somewhat intentionally too, but we wanted to pick a fight. But you know, Challenger would get knocked like, you're just going to show up at the customer and tell them, this is what you need to know. It's like, no, I wouldn't do that. There's a subtlety to the art of this, right?
Yeah. Challenger sale wasn't, let's be a jerk to our customer.
That's what Matt always says. We didn't call it the jerk.
I don't know who was reading the 2-minute version. Of, you know,
a lot of people.
Let's
face it, I would have. If I had not written the book, I would have written the 2-minute version. But anyway.
Are you kidding?
Yeah,
Professor Rackman gave you guys the foreword to that. So it said it was the most important advance in selling for many years. And by the way, I'm sure the whole world asks him for a foreword for a book because he wrote Spin Selling.
Yeah,
and he doesn't write that many. So
that's right.
But just going back to where I think this point is interesting for our listeners, and it's not that we know everything, but what I find with sales organizations, oftentimes they have a sales process, but there's not sharing of what we understand or what we're seeing in our market with our clients. So if I've got a customer base, it's the aggregation and insight in terms of what that customer base is doing that is of huge value to your next prospect. And you're not saying, Wachovia Bank did this or Bank of America did this, but I can say what we're seeing in the marketplace is organizations are leveraging our software, to plug leakage or to dramatically reduce, time to close quarter end books, or to ensure that there's no compliance issues because they're managing risk. And
sorry, keep going. Yeah.
And then I'd say, by the way, they're saying our client base is telling us that their top 3 priorities going into 8 to 10% inflation are A, B, C, and D. And that doesn't, that's not Mark saying I'm an expert and I've got the world's top business acumen. But I think in some cases it does tell a prospect, maybe I'll actually re-engage Mark for a conversation.
Because he knows people, he has access. Because the value, notice the value that you're bringing to the table in that conversation isn't your expertise, it's your access. Do you see what I'm saying? It's the fact that you have those perspectives. This is, I think, if I think about it, it's how I've made my career over at least 19 years. I've had access to hundreds and hundreds of chief sales officers and marketers around the world, and I can tell you what they're thinking because I talk to them, right? So it's a very similar thing. Because there's real value in it. Let's not denigrate that. I don't think anyone has, but because your customers say, wow, it's not that Mark knows things, is Mark has access to things which allows him to know things, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
So now let me throw this on the table, and I'd love to get your reaction, because this is sort of where my thinking is in the recent weeks. See if you buy this. So a lot of what you've said so far, and it's all consistent, of course, with Challenger, is all about, we talk about as frame breaking. So how can so particularly in the Challenger customer, we map all this out. To this, I'm so proud of the Challenger customer, because it really puts a structure around what we do and what we did as researchers and what we suggest people do as sales, of building customer mental models and breaking mental models. And I geek out on this stuff, but all of that is this idea of frame breaking. Right. So how can I take the customer's mental model and show them an opportunity that they missed, an opportunity to make money or save money that they haven't fully anticipated? This is heart and soul challenge, right? And we just talked a little bit about how to do that more diplomatically, how to do that more objectively, how to position yourself as Switzerland. But nonetheless, even in the riff you just did, Mark, you're coming to the table with your access, suggesting that there's a different way to think about things. And I think that's absolutely right. Now, fast forward, believe it or not, 10 years to today. And now we live in the world where we were talking about earlier, around just overwhelming amounts, not just of information, but high quantities of high quality information, where maybe not everyone is out there doing the Challenger sale, and not everyone out there is doing what we call commercial insight, but there's a lot of people saying a lot of smart things with a lot of data behind it. And it leaves customers really, really overwhelmed. So now in this world, if I show up, even with my great phrase that pays, right, and working with other customers like you, one of the things that we've been surprised to find is, and you lay it on the table, you're just as likely to get customer reaction of like, not like, wow, I never thought about that way before. That's amazing. Let's talk, which is the Challenger story. You might get like, oh my God, there's one more thing I got to think about. I'm so overwhelmed right now. Call me in 6 months. I got to figure this out. It's just, I'm saying, it's like, I still think frame breaking and Challenger and all the things around it are absolutely right answer. But if you're just one more person saying something really, really smart, in today's world, customers are going to find that not helpful, but actually frustrating. So by the way, I call this the smartness arms race. And basically what happened is I just did a podcast with Matt Hines, or as a LinkedIn Live this week, with Matt. We called it the death of thought leadership, which is
we've all been doing thought leadership for 20
years. Well, that's
years.
Exactly right. I mean, it's like for the last 5 years or so.
That's the differentiation, my thought leadership.
100%. I can't differentiate on my product because I got replicated. I can't differentiate on my solution because I got replicated. I know I'll differentiate on thought leadership. So we all got on the bandwagon of being the smart company, and we have marketing automation and content marketing strategies allow us to spam the world at scale better than ever before with really high quality content. I call this the smartness arms race. And effectively where we've landed is the smartness arms race has ended in a tie, because everyone's saying really smart stuff and that was no longer differentiated. And the only one to lose is your customer. And if that sounded like a canned little bit, it is, but I think it's absolutely right nonetheless. So, all right, where does that, to put all of that together now, Mark? Now, where does that get us? It gets us to a place where frame breaking is probably necessary, but no longer sufficient. Right. And that's an interesting thing to think about. So again, this is not a backpedaling from Challenger, because no one's going to unilaterally disarm in a smartness arms race. I think that's a bad idea. But what I'll tell you, I think it means for Challenger and that whole sort of body of work is you need to be more precise than ever before and more differentiated than ever before, which actually effectively takes everything we wrote about and raises the bar on it and makes it that much more. It was never easy to begin with. That's the biggest complaint about Challenger. Like, this is freaking hard. It's like, I know, right? So it makes it that like you have to be better at than ever before to be really world-class frame breaking in such a way that you stand out. However, the thinking now for me is, and a lot of the work we did at Gartner, and I continue to do around Sensemaking, is that there's another opportunity to not just be a frame breaker, but to be what I call a frame maker. And this gets really interesting, right? So imagine, so when we talk about things we've talked about in the past at Garden around things like buyer enablement, how can I become my customer's buying coach and coach them through their own internal processes? Because frankly, you know how they're going to get stalled better than they know themselves. How can I coach them through information? And there it is, the long, hard slog, right? We call that the spaghetti bowl. Kudos to my dear friend Martha Mathers, who drew that on her couch on a Sunday afternoon with her 2 kids. That's I told Martha, I said, you know what we need a picture of the buying journey that everyone talks about as linear and just like arrows going everywhere. To make it as messy as you can. And she brought that back in on, yeah, I know, she brought that back on, and Martha's genius. She's now a CMO herself, and she brought that back on Monday. It's like, yeah, that is it. We're gonna make that picture is going around the world, Martha, and it has, right? But so if I'm overwhelmed with my own decision-making complexity inside my own company as a customer, I need help there. It's like, frame this up for me. Give me some guidance. Who should I talk to? What should I say? Don't blow me away with yet another insight. I mean, that's good. Again, I want to be careful. I still think challenge is right, frame breaking, but don't leave me hanging, because now this is the fact that the unspoken truth, although we used to say this all the time about challengers, the better you get, the more disruptive your insight, the harder it is for your customer to actually buy it, because now I got to go sell more people and something that's even more disruptive. So I've got to give them a framework for how to navigate their own purchase process. We call that buyer enablement. And then sense making is I've got to give them a framework for how to navigate all that information out there. Don't just give them more information, even if it's in the form of a well-packaged insight. Help them understand that information in the context of all of the other information that they're going to encounter. So let me put all that together, Mark, and I'd say like this. So going back to your riff, in working with other banks like you, one of the things we found is here's the 3 things that they're really working on right now. They're top of mind for them in an inflationary cycle. We were surprised to find that the number 1 thing that they're focused on is actually not what we had expected. We thought they would be focused on this, but instead the smartest, most progressive ones are actually focused on this. And here's why. So that would be like a reframe. I'm making this up as I go, but that's a reframe.
No, it's great though.
Now, so that's frame breaking. Now here's frame making, would sound like this, which is, now I would imagine for them, that's the right thing to do. For you, there's a real question whether like, is that where I want to spend my time and money, or would I be better off spending it over here? There's a lot of information out there on all of this. I imagine it's hard to sift through. Here's a way to kind of put it together for you. We found that if you boil it down and ask yourself these 3 questions, however you answer them is going to help you give you some sense for how to feel more confident that you've made the right choice for you.
God, that is great.
Do you see Thomas, what I'm saying? Because I'm solving for their confidence in themselves by giving a framework within which they can come to their own conclusions. That's how you sell today.
So I do like it. I do like it, Brent. Thomas, if you're listening, that should be the clip for the beginning of this podcast, by the way. The second thing actually I like, to be honest with you, is in today's world with what we're seeing, and whatever that stat was at the beginning that I couldn't pull back. I think what it will tell us is it'll also call out somebody who's not right for us, or where this is 100%. Not a priority. Right. So when they come back and they go, that's interesting. This is where a lot of professional salespeople struggle. They don't want to have that conversation because if there's misalignment, suddenly they're going, maybe I won't get the deal. I want to know.
And then I gotta pull them out of my funnel, and then I gotta explain to my manager where I'm going to hit my number with a $99 million deal that I pulled out of the funnel. I'll tell you. So all kudos to in the HBR article, it's called Sensemaking for Sales, is the January-February issue of HBR.
Great article, by the way. Great article.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate it. If it's not, I'm proud of the article. I'm proud of the team that put it together. If it sounds like I'm self-aggrandizing, I don't mean to, but it's really important stuff.
When I get published in Harvard, I'm going to self-aggrandise. I'm going to be all over the internet.
You're funny. It's humbling. Honestly, it's very humbling. But all right. So this is going somewhere, and I've lost my train of thought.
Sorry.
Where was it? Hold on, I'll get it. But when you think of, no, I lost it.
Deals out of the funnel. Deals out of the funnel.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. So in that article, we profile, obviously with permission, a company called Expedient. Expedient is a cloud, among other things, a cloud services company. They compete against some, as you can imagine, some really big companies. The chief strategy officer, head of sales at Expedient, is a guy named Brian Smith. All that's a wind up to simply just a quote from Brian, which I think is so powerful, and is exactly what you're talking about, Mark. And I've seen this actually, as I've spoken at his sales kickoffs and worked with his team, I've actually seen him stand up in front of his entire sales organization and say the following words. He says, our job in sales is to help our customers make the best decision possible for them in as little time as possible.
That's great.
That's our job. And he said, look, if that decision winds up not being a decision for us, that's okay.
Yep.
But if that's true, I want that to happen quicker, not longer. And oh, by the way, I want them to know that we were there to help them come to that decision, such that the next time they have to decide, they'll come to us for more help. How do we help our customers make the best decision possible, and as the best decision they can in as little time as possible? Isn't that powerful?
It's fantastic,
Brian's a
by
genius.
the way.
This is so good.
Just fantastic.
Yeah.
So just building out, let's go a little bit more on sense making and sales.
Yeah.
What are a couple of other tips? And folks, go grab the Harvard article. This is fantastic, by the way. But one of the things I might ask in terms of two things, a couple of other data points we want to share about sense making and sales, how we help our customers think through that decision, and frame making. And then the second thing, how should we be leveraging the privileged relationships that we have with our existing base? How do we extract the information and the knowledge, or work with them?
Yeah. Okay.
Thoughts there?
Yeah, some great questions. Okay, so very briefly, not to recap the entire sense making story, but but there's some really interesting thoughts on this. So sense making is specifically designed. Well, it's not that we didn't design it; we discovered it in the research. But nonetheless, its objective is to help your customers solve for what I would consider to be one of their single biggest challenges today, which is being overwhelmed with high quantities of high quality information. It's not just that there's a lot of information out there, there's a lot of good information. So, and if you're telling me to zig and they're telling me to zag, but you're both convincing, I don't know what to do. So again, I better study this more. Or if you're telling me to zig and they're telling me to zig, then it's again, a smartness arms race ended in a tie, right? Everybody's smart, but I don't know who to believe. So I can't use the quality of the information as a source, as a criterion for selecting a supplier anymore. So what all that means, and this is not something that was even close to our radar screen 10 years ago, is that as a sales professional and as frankly, as a supplier today, among everything else, you need to have what I would call an information strategy for how you engage with your customers, right? So we have a qualification strategy, we have a segmentation strategy, we have an account plan, we have even the thing we do in the rental car on the way there back in the days when we traveled, like, okay, you're going to say this, we role play it and we rehearse it. But I don't know that we've ever really sat down and thought, what information are we going to share with them? What information are we going to hold back? What information do we believe they've already seen from other sources, including our competitors?
Nice.
What conclusions do we believe they've probably come to as a result of consuming that information? How might we help them make sense out of all that information? FedEx Europe does a really good job. I say this with permission. The team there has actually taken this to heart, and they've actually built an entire framework for their sales team on how to engage customers with information at different points in the purchase process, acknowledging that customers have different information challenges, either too much, too little, not enough, the right. And all of this comes back to the sense making ideas. So there's three sort of approaches to information that we found in the research. One was sense making. The other two were giving and telling. And by the way, Mark, just a quick footnote. When we originally did all this work, we originally called it the giver, the teller, and the sense maker, because coming out of the Challenger DNA, and it blew up in our faces in a really bad way in a meeting I did in London, because there was a number of companies there that said, I just rolled out Challenger literally this week, and now you're telling me don't be a challenger, be a sense maker, and they were like literally legit angry, and which was totally fair. It's like, will you get your story straight? So I refer to it now not as sense maker, but sense making. And the reason why is because what this is all about, this isn't about a profile. It's not about a person. It's not about, your DNA or who you are. I would argue Challenger was never that either, but it's kind of become that. So that's a different conversation. But this is simply a technique. It's a technique or a practice that anyone not only can engage in, but frankly should engage in. So giving is all about, we find a lot of reps, their information strategy is to just give customers information. I call this indiscriminate generosity, right? So the idea being like, my role as a sales professional, the way that I deliver value to you is by providing you information, which you can use to deliberate. So if I provide you some information, I'm valuable. If I provide you a lot of information, I'm super valuable. These are the same sales reps that come back to marketing and say, I need another calculator, I need another insight. And you say, why? And it's because I'm talking to the customer again. I got to have something to say, right? And what we find is, not surprising, giving, it's like throwing logs on the fire of overwhelmedness, right? It's like you're just exacerbating the very problem that we're trying to solve. Telling, on the other hand, is really interesting. A lot of sales professionals fall into this telling category, which is, it's relying on, it's not being Switzerland. It's the exact opposite of being Switzerland. It's like putting yourself at the center and saying, I've been doing this for 30 years. I've developed a lot of expertise. I've worked with a lot of clients. I think the
Yeah.
three things that you need to do are, so I'm leading with my opinion. I'm leading with my position. I'm telling you what I believe you should do. And in a world of multiple sources of information and multiple fact checking today, we find that customers are very skeptical of anyone who just claims that level of expertise versus someone who gives me access to expertise. And that's what sense-making reps are doing. They're creating a framework. They're not saying, here's what I think you should do. They're saying, and working with other customers like you, here's the three questions that come up a lot. Have you, by the way, and actually, I've talked to Brian about this at Expedient. They will sometimes literally use their competitors' collateral to have a sales conversation.
Wow.
I'm not suggesting this is the right answer for everybody, but they will literally, because it's going to happen anyway. What have you learned, Mark, in your career when things are worried, like you're worried that something bad's going to happen? Should you run away from it? Probably not, right? You should run right at it. It's like, oh God, they probably saw that collateral from our competitors. And so Mark is really funny. Brian's initial reaction was like, every one of our customers has seen this amazing piece of collateral competitors created. So what we need to do is create an equally amazingly good piece of collateral that our customers are just as likely to see. And he realized it was kind of fool's errand. One, because of the brand name of his competitors, but two, because I'm just exacerbating a problem, just too much information. So rather than doing that, he said, look, actually it's easier and frankly cheaper for us if we just use their collateral to have the conversation. Have you seen this from our competitors? If you haven't, you really need to see it because they raise some really good points. And you're going to want to go through this. In fact, if we go through this, here's what we like about it. Here are the 3 points that they make that we would completely agree with. By the way, as you read this, I think the 3 questions you're going to ask yourself for you would be these. So notice my role now is no longer just the role of providing yet more information, because I've effectively and very subtly knocked my competitor down a peg. Like, yeah, they can give you white papers. I'm not here to give you white papers. I'm here to help you make sense out of all this information. You've just positioned yourself one tier higher on the value chain of information. Again, I'm not suggesting everyone run out and use their competitors' collateral to have a sales conversation, but I'm showing you when you think about solving for helping your customers feel more confident in themselves, it takes you to unexpected and really interesting places about how you might interact with your customers.
You know, Brent, when I had Daniel Pink on the podcast a month or two ago, at the end, I asked him, I said, listen, what are you seeing today in sales? Because of course, to sell as human was years old, 10 years, 15 years old. He said, listen, B2B, professional B2B sales today, it's management consulting. It's exactly what management consulting always was. And exactly what you've just described is management access, helping you make sense of these things, helping you make this decision, collaboration, building trust. I think, when you reference the other one where it was, if I'm the thought leader and I'm saying you have to do this, this, and this, you're right. Some of those things could be very credible and true, but I think there's always this feeling in the background that he's got another agenda, which is to sell 100%. Me something. And so somehow to figure out how do we break through that and get to a higher plane. The best salespeople have always done this, by the way. They've got to that different.
I'd agree. And this is like, there's terms, and I think some ways challengers become part of this terminology of like trusted advisor, consultative selling. It's like this canon of terms that have become almost like empty vessels into which we could pour anything. But if I were to say, be a trusted advisor, this is what I would mean. If I were to say engage in consultative selling, this is what I would mean. That I don't like to use those terms, not because they're wrong or right, but because they mean different things to different people. And you get a lot of false positives. But I think that's exactly right. And you can see the value in this kind of frame making because quite literally companies, think about the BCG 4-quadrant matrix, right? There's like the whole company's built off of one frame. Well, that's unfair to BCG, but the consulting industry banks billions of dollars every year by providing frameworks for sorting and making decisions for their customers. In the B2B world as a supplier, your opportunity to monetize that isn't so much through just the provision of the frame, but by providing the frame, leading customers to ultimately buy from you or to decide to go elsewhere, thus reducing your opportunity cost as quickly as possible.
I think also management consulting coming in and saying what we're seeing in the market is that these core metrics for a company like you, these are the types of business metrics that we see, and we see a gap with you.
100%.
They're bringing that knowledge of what's out there. Hey, you've had an exciting career change recently. Tell us a little bit about that.
So yeah, so I told you before we got on the air, it's like my pronouns are still a little weird about the we's and the they's with Gartner because
Right.
I was there for 19 years and building research at CVM and Gartner.
Wow.
I know it's nuts. I am now. So we're recording this on I think it's a Thursday. Oh, today's Friday.
It's
Look
a
at that. That's awesome.
Friday.
Yeah. So I am now 6 days in my new job. So I now work
Congratulations.
at a company called Ecosystems. It's ecosystems.us. It's a SaaS company because every company today is a SaaS company. Founder and now good friend and quickly becoming a dear friend, Chad Quinn. And so you'll find, I mentioned Chad only because you'll find him out there and he's got a really nice podcast, which I may be taking over or at least doing with him. And he's very active on social. Briefly, and some of your listeners will geek out on this, like I'm going to across the next 10 years, I think, but the Ecosystems lives and breathes in the world of what's called value engineering or value management. And I don't know, Mark, if this term has hit your radar screen yet. It's only just, I'm like, it's like one of these things, like my eyes are opening. Like this is like, it's kind of like, you remember about 6-7 years ago when customer success kind of came over the horizon, like a freight train. And now everyone's talking about customer success as customer success function. That's where value management is today. But so Ecosystems provides a platform to our clients, and the idea of the platform is it's a means, a very slick with a really nice interface, very easy to use, all that kind of stuff you need. But it's a platform or a tool which suppliers and customers use collaboratively to define, track, and then measure the dimensions of value along which they want to measure their relationship. So you could use it in a pre-sale, sale, and
Fantastic
success,
idea.
right? Renewals, growth, all of it. But it basically,
Great idea.
we talk about frame making, right? This is software that creates a frame for you to have discussions with your customers around value. What do we want to get out of this relationship? What do you want to get out of it? What do we want to get out of it? Qualitatively, quantitatively? What are the metrics we're going to track? How do they relate to one another? How can we put that on a really easy use dashboard such that you can go share it with your colleagues to build consensus? How can we track it over time? This is the world that I live in now. And what I hadn't really appreciated, Mark, is companies like Google and others, particularly in the SaaS world, have created now, literally, they have what they call a value management office or some name like that. They have a chief value management officer. There's so much going on in this world of value management, which is directly adjacent to sales and marketing, but slightly its weird kissing cousin. And I find it so fascinating because it ties all right back to buyer enablement, to sense making and frame making. So, and Chad and the team at Eco have I kind of think it almost like a patronage, like they've given me a home where I can conduct research and continue to do the research we've been talking about today, and then to build a community. So we're going to build just the world's biggest, best value management community. It's going to be very vibrant. Already, we're all well on our way, and it's going to be super exciting. So that's what I'm doing now.
So wow. First of all, what a great idea.
Yeah.
And so, we've always heard of value engineering, but more on the front end of the sales process, where enterprise software people would go in and do value engineering. Same thing as the consulting firms. What are the metrics? You're below your competitors. Let's talk about how we get you there.
Yeah.
What I love about this, think of this as a sales tool for an organization that implements this today, works with, pick their top 20% of customers. When they measure that value and actually track it with definitive metrics, imagine taking that to the next client who's on the fence.
100%.
Now for sense making, how do I feel emotionally confident that I can actually go forward with this decision? And I'm looking at data, what a competitor has achieved over the last 4 years. This is the business case.
Exactly. And then just to add one notch to that, not to turn this into a commercial, but I am super excited about this. This is why I joined the company. But so the best companies out there, I think you'd agree, and you were doing $1 billion deals, right? That does happen already for the key accounts or the strategic or global accounts, because it has to, right? But the question for all of us then is, okay, I can do that for my top 15 or my top 15%. How do I scale that to everybody, to all of my accounts and to all of my sales reps, and equip them to have that conversation? And that's what this software is meant to do. And that's, again, I'm pretty excited about just being involved in it, because I think there's a lot we can learn. It becomes a platform for my research too. So I'm super excited about that.
Back in the day with those mega deals, the clients would hire professional negotiators.
Mm-hmm.
So they're so large, you get to 12 people at the table. And what they would push for, which was very smart, but something was tough to step forward to, value tracking, value engineering was so important to them that there was penalties in the agreement that if you didn't achieve those levels that
Yeah.
both parties thought we were going to get to, you get penalized as a
Yeah.
supplier.
Yeah.
So, the tracking was so well done when professional folks came in to have a platform to bring this down lower. I think it's a great idea.
Well, and it's interesting right now, we're selling it largely on the sales side. So either sales teams, customer success teams. I am super intrigued about selling it on the buying side. So imagine if a company said, we are happy to investigate perhaps purchasing from you, but the only way we're going to consider a purchase from you is by running it through this system, because we have to be nailed down and agreed on collaboratively what we're getting out of this relationship. It exists where I like to live in my research, is in that boundary spanning world between selling and buying. How does that happen? That's been just intensely fertile ground for research, because that's where technology and humanity meet in super interesting ways.
This podcast was super interesting.
I agree. I just hanging out and talk. I think it's interesting just hanging out and talking, Mark. But I appreciate it, because hopefully, if anyone's interested, they can find more about ecosystems at ecosystems.us. I'm on LinkedIn. Just send me a note. I love talking to people about this, and it's just. I'm on Twitter too. I don't spend much time on Twitter, so LinkedIn is where I hang out mostly. Although I'm thinking, Mark, TikTok may be the thing. I'm starting to, it's like, so I'd love to get somebody send me a note on LinkedIn who listen to this and tell me, and you're probably gonna have to be 30 or younger. I don't know, but I'm wondering, like 2-minute, 1-minute videos on TikTok. I don't know. I'm starting to think this might be where our future's going, Mark, and old folks like us are just dinosaurs.
I don't know. Old folks like us. I'm 23.
Sorry. No, that was.
Are you kidding?
Old folks like me.
What are you talking about? For those listening to this podcast, we feel bad for Brent, but we support our elders. No,
there you go.
Listen, what a great discussion, Brent. We're going to talk again for sure.
Let's make it a regular event, Mark.
We got to make it a regular event.
100%.
And thank you, Brent.
You are welcome.
For everybody who listened today, thank you. So as you all know, the reason we do this podcast is because we actually love having these conversations. At the core, that's it. But you've told us that we provide a lot of value in these kind of conversations, but we want to keep elevating the value we provide. So all of you listening, I'm Mark Cox. I'm Mark Cox at inthefunnel.com. If you like this podcast, fantastic. Please like and share it. If there's some way we can add even more value, please email me directly and let me know. We want the constructive feedback to continue to get better doing this. All the links that Brent gave us, they'll be in the show notes for today. And again, special thanks to Brent Adamson. Just a fantastic conversation. And we're going to make Brent a regular guest on the Selling Well podcast. Thanks, Brent.
Cheers, Mark.